In professional wrestling, fame can feel eternal. Crowds chant your name, your image is frozen in time, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like nothing can touch you. But immortality comes at a cost. Few families in wrestling history reached the heights of the Von Erichs, and few were asked to give as much in return. This is not just a story about championships or sold-out arenas. This is a story about expectation, pressure, and legacy. This is the story of a family that gave everything to the ring and discovered what truly lasts when the noise finally fades. Fritz Von Erich was born Jack Atkinson on August 16, 1929. The world would later know him as Fritz Von Erich. Fritz was tough, disciplined, demanding, traits that served him well in professional wrestling, but would later shape the world he built around his family. By the 1960s and 70s, Fritz had become more than a wrestler. In Dallas, Texas, he built world-class championship wrestling into one of the most successful territories in the country. Wrestling wasn't just entertainment to Fritz, it was purpose. Before the world ever knew the name Von Erich, Fritz and his wife Doris J. Smith had a son named Jack. Jack Atkinson Jr. was born in 1952. He was the family's first child, and he would never live to see that empire. In 1959, at just 6 years old, Jack Jr. was playing outside near the family home. He came into contact with a live electrical wire and fell face down into a puddle left behind by melting snow. He drowned. The loss devastated the family, and though it was rarely spoken about publicly, the first tragedy lingered, quietly, invisibly, long before the wrestling world ever took notice. For the Von Erichs, loss came before fame. After the loss of his first son, Fritz Von Erich would go on to raise 5 more boys. One by one, they grew up around the ring, and one by one, they were drawn into its gravity. Kevin Von Erich, born in 1957, was the second oldest. David Von Erich, born in 1958, came right after. Then, Kerry Von Erich, born in 1960, rounded out the trio. Together, the 3 oldest brothers embodied everything that Fritz believed a wrestling dynasty should be. Behind them were Mike and Chris, born in 1964 and 1969 respectively. Younger, quieter, and still searching for where they fit in a family already defined by expectation. Not every son was shaped for the same path, but the path had already been laid out. To the outside world, the Von Erichs looked destined for greatness. Inside the family, the weight of that expectation was already being felt. Fritz Von Erich was more than a promoter. Before the empire, before world class, he was a wrestler. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Fritz competed at the highest level of the business. He held multiple regional championships, he headlined major arenas, he was respected as an imposing, legitimate presence in the ring. But there was one prize that always remained just out of reach. Fritz Von Erich never won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. In an era where that title defined greatness, it was the one achievement missing from his legacy, and as the years passed, that absence began to matter more. When Fritz's sons entered the wrestling business, they didn't just inherit his name, they inherited an unfinished dream. One by one, they were molded not only to succeed, but to achieve what their father never could. Championships were no longer accolades, they were validation. And for Fritz, the ultimate crown, the one that had eluded him, now felt within reach. not through himself, but through his sons. Wrestling didn't arrive all at once for the Von Erich brothers. It came in stages. Before they were presented as a united front, each of the older brothers entered the business alone and proved they belong on their own terms. Kevin Von Erich was the first to fully commit, beginning his professional wrestling career in 1976. Agile, fearless, unconventional, Kevin moved differently than most wrestlers of his time. His speed, risk-taking, and relentless pace made him stand out immediately in world class. Combined with his athletic build and natural charisma, Kevin became a major star early in his career. He quickly established himself as a reliable main event performer, capturing some of the major titles and heated feuds. On January 21, 1980, Kevin even made a special appearance in the World Wrestling Federation. David Von Erich followed soon after, beginning his wrestling career in 1977. Taller than his brothers, but less physically imposing, David relied not on power, but on skill. Calm, precise, and technically gifted, David wrestled with a natural smoothness that immediately set him apart. He didn't overwhelm opponents, he outthought them. Within the wrestling world, David quickly earned a reputation as one of the most technically complete members of the family. Kerry Von Erich entered the business in 1978, where Kevin brought speed and David brought precision. Kerry brought power. Muscular, explosive, and physically commanding, Kerry combined raw strength with surprising athleticism, quickly becoming one of the most recognizable stars in world class. As well, just like his brothers, his presence added a larger-than-life dimension to the family, giving the Von Erichs a balance few stables could match. By the early 1980s, the Von Erich brothers were no longer just heirs to a legacy. Each of them had proven himself as a singles competitor. Each had climbed to the top of the territory. They were different, but together, they were perfectly balanced. The rivalry that would define world class did not begin as a war. The fabulous Freebirds and the Von Erichs were allies, teaming up together on different occasions, helping one another. The rivalry began as a championship pursuit. In 1982, Kerry Von Erich found himself chasing the ultimate prize in professional wrestling at the time, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The champion was Ric Flair, charismatic, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it took to remain on top. Kerry's first challenge for the title ended up in disappointment. He came close, but it wasn't enough. A rematch was scheduled, this time under far more dangerous circumstances. The match would take place inside a steel cage, no disqualifications, and presiding over the bout was Michael Hayes of the Freebirds. The decision raised eyebrows immediately. Inside the cage, chaos was inevitable. As the match wore on, the Freebirds began to interfere, attempting to help Kerry secure the championship. But Kerry refused. He didn't want to win that way. To him, a world championship meant something. It had to be earned. But that decision would change everything. As Kerry rejected their help, Terry Gordy responded with violence. He drove Kerry's head into the steel cage. The impact was sickening. The crowd felt silent, then erupted. The opening allowed Flair to retain the championship. The match was over, but something far more dangerous had begun. In the eyes of the Texas fans, a line had been crossed. Kerry Von Erich had chosen honor over victory and paid for it. The Freebirds were no longer outsiders, they were traitors. And from that moment forward, the rivalry was no longer about championships. It was personal. The feud escalated throughout 1982 into 83 and 84, pushing world class into unprecedented heights. The Sportatorium became volatile. Trash filled the ring, police were brought in to maintain order, Wrestling had crossed a dangerous threshold where the audience no longer believed they were watching a performance. To them, it was real, and the Von Erichs were at the center of it. Amid the chaos of world-class rise, one brother stood apart, not because he demanded attention, but because he never needed to. Within world-class, David quickly became a cornerstone. He captured the NWA American Heavyweight Championship and the NWA Texas Heavyweight Championship, proving himself not just as a Von Erich, but as a champion in his own right. Within Texas, David had become known as the Yellow Rose of Texas, a symbol of pride, elegance, and the belief that he was meant to lead the family forward. He was the one sent to the ring to steady big matches, to anchor long programs, to make opponents look their best. Within the industry, David's reputation grew rapidly. Veterans spoke openly about his ability. Many believed he was the most complete wrestler in the family and the brother best suited to carry the name beyond Texas. By 1983, David Von Erich's momentum was no longer subtle. He wasn't just respected, he was being positioned. On September 16, 1983, David defeated Ric Flair to win the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Championship. To many within the industry, the significance was unmistakable. Beating the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, even for a regional title, was often the final step before something bigger. The win solidified what many already believed. David Von Erich was ready. Just over 3 months later, on December 25th of 1983, David challenged Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. For the Von Erich family, the significance was immense. Fritz Von Erich had chased that title his entire career and never held it. And now, through David, the dream that had gone unfinished for decades was suddenly within reach. It was a marquee event, champion versus challenger, legacy versus ascension. The match was hard-fought, but when the night ended, Flair retained the championship. The loss did little to slow David's rise though. If anything, it confirmed that he belonged in that company. Days later, Flair gave an interview that shifted the focus, not toward David, but toward the younger brother Mike Von Erich. Flair dismissed Mike as a bad wrestler. He claimed Mike wouldn't last 10 minutes in the ring with him. The comment struck a nerve, not just with the fans but with David. David responded with one of the most impassioned speeches of his career. Calmed, controlled, but unmistakably intense. David proposed a challenge. A 10-minute challenge match. Ric Flair versus Mike Von Erich. If Flair defeated Mike within 10 minutes, David would never again ask for a shot at the big title. But if Mike survived the full 10 minutes, David would name the time, the place, and every stipulation for his world title match with Ric Flair. The challenge took place in WCCW Wrestling Star Wars. Against all expectations, Ric Flair could not defeat Mike within the 10-minute limit. When the time expired, the building erupted. David had won the challenge, and with it, the right to shape his own destiny. On February 6th of 1984, in what would become his final interview, David spoke not about himself, but about his brother. He expressed how proud he was of Mike, how much it meant to him to see his younger brother prove the doubters wrong. David then turned his attention back to Ric Flair. He confirmed that when he returned to Texas, he would name the date, the location, and the stipulations for their NWA World Heavyweight Championship match. The plan was clear. The build would begin when David came home, likely in the spring of 1984. But David never made it home. While touring Japan with All Japan Pro Wrestling, David Von Erich had passed away in his hotel room on February 10th, 1984. He was 25 years old. It was not a promoter or an official who found him. It was Bruiser Brody who broke the news to Kevin. A close friend of the Von Erich family and a man who had traveled the world alongside David. And at his funeral, as family and friends gathered to say goodbye, those in attendance saw Brody lean down and kiss David farewell. A final gesture, not out of spectacle, but of respect. The official cause of death was ruled acute enteritis, the result of ruptured intestines. Over the years, other theories have circulated, including speculation about a possible painkiller overdose. But the Von Erich family has consistently stood by the official findings, and for those closest to David, the cause mattered far less than the loss. David Von Erich left behind unfinished business, unrealized greatness, and a future that never arrived. The brother who was meant to lead was gone, and the dynasty had lost its heart. David's death left a void that could never be filled, but the wrestling world did not stop. Schedules were kept, expectations remained. And once again, the weight of an unfinished dream fell onto the shoulders of Kerry Von Erich. In May of 1984, just months after David's passing, Kerry Von Erich defeated the Nature Boy Ric Flair to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, honoring his brother David in the process. In front of over 45,000 fans, it was destiny, a big moment as the brothers embraced Kerry in what would be the biggest moment of his career. The modern-day warrior had achieved what had eluded his family forever. But behind the celebration, the timing was cruel. Kerry wasn't just winning a championship. He was inheriting a burden meant for someone else. 2 years later, in 1986, Kerry's life changed forever. While riding his motorcycle, he was involved in a devastating accident that shattered his right foot. The pain was unbearable. His recovery, very uncertain. What happened next was told in many different ways. Some say Kerry walked on the injured foot too soon after surgery, while others believe he returned to wrestling before he was healed. According to Kevin Von Erich, Kerry's determination to push through the pain only made things worse. The injury deteriorated, infection set in, and doctors were left with no choice. Kerry's foot was amputated. For a wrestler whose identity was built on strength and movement and athleticism, the loss was devastating. Physically, Kerry endured constant pain. Psychologically, the impact was even greater. The painkillers prescribed to help him cope slowly became something else, a dependency, a crutch far heavier than any championship belt. And yet, Kerry returned to the ring. He wrestled with a prosthetic leg, a secret known only to a few. Fellow wrestlers later recalled that Kerry would even shower with his boots on, afraid the truth would be discovered. To the audience, he was still the modern-day warrior, but inside, he was fighting a battle no one could see. As world class declined, Kerry sought a fresh start. In June 1990, he arrived in the World Wrestling Federation as the Texas Tornado. On a national stage, Kerry once again opened like a star. He captured the Intercontinental Championship and entered high-profile feuds, including a memorable rivalry with Mr. Perfect. And he also stood alongside wrestling's biggest heroes, teaming up with the Ultimate Warrior and others at the height of the era. To fans, Kerry had reinvented himself, but the pain never left. The addiction followed him, and the pressure to live up to a legacy built on loss never loosened its grip. Kerry Von Erich had achieved what his father never could. He had worn the crown, he had lived the dream, but the cost was unbearable, and the weight of that crown was slowly pulling him under. Not every member of the Von Erich family was meant to be a wrestler, but in a family defined by the ring, choice was often an illusion. Mike Von Erich was never like his brothers. Wrestling was not his dream. He was quieter, creative. Mike was drawn to music and film. He wanted to work behind the camera, helping his father with world-class television production. Still, when he entered the ring, Mike did not fail. He tried, and in moments that are often forgotten, he succeeded. Wrestling alongside his brothers, Mike became part of championship teams, sharing in the legacy he was born into. He captured the NWA World Six-Man Tag Team Championship, standing shoulder to shoulder with Kevin and Kerry. In singles competition, Mike would also hold the NWA American Heavyweight Championship, proving that he was capable of winning at a high level, just like his brothers. These moments mattered to the fans and especially to Mike himself. For a time, it felt as though he might find his place. Not as a replacement, not as a symbol, but as his own man. But the pressure never erased. The comparisons never stopped. The expectations placed upon him were far heavier than any championship belt. In 1985, Mike injured his shoulder from a dropkick and underwent surgery. What would have been routine became catastrophic. He developed toxic shock syndrome following the procedure, and it left Mike with severe complications, including lasting brain damage. The young man who once dreamed of music and cameras was no longer the same. Mike became withdrawn, depressed, haunted by the feeling he had failed, not because of what he had done, but because of what he could no longer be. On April 12, 1987, Mike Von Erich took his own life. He was 23 years old. The family was devastated. Yet even in grief, the weight of expectation did not disappear. It simply moved on. Fritz Von Erich had always wanted to be a wrestler. More than anything, he wanted to belong, but Chris's body betrayed him. Smaller than his brothers, plagued by brittle bones and chronic injuries, Chris was never physically equipped for the punishment of the ring. But still, he tried. He trained. He wrestled. He endured pain just to prove he deserved the name. The comparisons were constant. The expectations were crushing. The shadow of his brother's legacy loomed over every step he took. On September 12, 1991, Fritz Von Erich passed away. He was 21 years old. 2 sons lost, 2 lives defined, not by weakness, but by expectations no one should have ever been asked to carry. After the loss of Mike and then Chris, the Von Erich family was barely holding together. For Kerry Von Erich, the weight was unbearable. The pain never stopped, the injuries lingered, the addiction followed him, and the losses kept coming. Kerry spoke often of his brothers, of missing them, of feeling as though they were calling him. People around him tried to help. Friends encouraged him to keep going, to remember his children, to hold on to the life he still had. But Kerry was tired. Tired of the pain, tired of the expectations, tired of surviving what no one should have ever had to endure. And his problems with the law were gaining on him, pushing him to the edge. On February 18, 1993, Kerry returned to his father's ranch. He asked Fritz if he could see a gun he had once given him as a gift. Before leaving, Kerry told his father he would be back soon and that they would eat lunch together. He never returned. Fritz would later say that the last words his son spoke to him were simple. Kerry hugged him and said, "Dad, I really love you." Kerry Von Erich walked into the woods and took his own life. He was 33 years old. The brother who had carried the crown, who lived the dream, who fought through impossible odds, was gone. For the Von Erich family, the loss was devastating, but no longer shocking. Grief had become familiar, silence had become routine, and only one brother remained. Kevin Von Erich. Long before he became the last brother, Kevin had already proven something rare. He endured. Wrestling barefoot, Kevin looked exposed, but he never fought like it. The risk-taking style that defined his career wasn't reckless, it was commitment. He became known as the Golden Warrior, a constant presence in world-class championship wrestling through every era of its rise and fall. As a singles competitor, Kevin captured the NWA American Heavyweight Championship and the NWA Texas Heavyweight Championship, earning the trust of fans and promoters alike. In Tag Team Championship, Kevin formed one of the most successful pairings in world class alongside his brother David, capturing the NWA Texas Tag Team Championship and the NWA American Tag Team Championship. Together, they even found success on an international stage, winning the All Asia Tag Team Championship in Japan. Kevin also teamed up with Kerry, capturing the NWA American Tag Team Championship, reinforcing what fans already believed, that the Von Erichs were strongest together. But Kevin's greatest contribution to world class was not a title, it was stable. When David passed away, Kevin stayed. When Mike struggled, Kevin stayed. When Chris was lost, Kevin stayed. And when Kerry fell deeper into pain, Kevin stayed. Match after match, night after night, Kevin carried a promotion built on grief without ever asking for sympathy. Outside the ring, Kevin built something the business could never take away from him. He married Pam Atkinson, and together they created a life rooted not in legacy, but in love. Kevin was a family man. In a world defined by travel, violence, and loss, he found stability in something simple and enduring. A home, a partner, a reason to keep going. As the losses mounted, so did the silence around him. One by one, the voices that had filled his life disappeared. Kevin was no longer just a wrestler. He was a witness. By 1993, Kevin Von Erich was the last surviving brother. The ring that had once given him purpose now felt like a reminder of everything he had lost. In one of his darkest moments, Kevin drove to a gun store. The people there could see that something was wrong. Kevin wanted to steal a gun and for things to get as bad as they could get. He had reached rock bottom. The old man looked at him for a long time and then simply said, "I love you, Kev." Kevin was taken aback and responded, "Thank you, sir." Sitting alone in his car, Kevin broke. He turned around, he got back into the store and returned the rifle. The men there embraced him and prayed for him. They saved him. It was a good day for Texas that day. Kevin chose to leave, but survival did not bring peace. Not yet. Kevin stepped away from the ring, carrying memories that never faded. The championships remained. The respect endured, but the weight was still there. Kevin Von Erich had survived what no one should have to. And though the ring still echoed in his life, his story was not yet finished. For decades, the Von Erich story revolved around one man's vision. Fritz Von Erich built world-class championship wrestling with the belief that greatness could be engineered through discipline, control, and relentless ambition. He believed in the ring. He believed in legacy. And above all, he believed his sons were destined to succeed where he had not. Fritz had chased the NWA World Heavyweight Championship his entire career and never held it. When his sons rose, that unfinished dream did not disappear. It transferred. Bookings were structured, expectations were reinforced. The business and the family became inseparable. In world class, Fritz was not just a promoter. He was the axis around which everything turned. The Sportatorium filled. Television ratings soared, Texas wrestling reached heights few territories ever achieved, but success came with a cost. As promoter, Fritz took significant control over his sons' careers, including their earnings, often framing his cuts as booking fees. The arrangement kept the business stable, but it also ensured dependency. As long as World Class thrived, the family remained bound to it. Away from the ring, the foundation was weakening as well. Fritz's marriage to Doris Von Erich, the mother of his children, eventually came to an end. The divorce marked another quiet fracture, a sign that the pressure shaping the business had also reshaped the family itself. When David passed away, the structure cracked. When Mike and Chris followed, it weakened further. And when Kerry was gone, the foundation collapsed entirely. By the 1990s, World Class Championship Wrestling was no longer the force it once was. Talent had left, television deals evaporated. The territory system itself was dying, overtaken by a new national model. The empire Fritz built could not survive the losses it had endured. In 1990, World Class Championship Wrestling officially closed its doors. The ring went quiet. The cameras shut off, and for the first time in decades, Fritz Von Erich was no longer a promoter. He was a father who had outlived his sons. Fritz rarely spoke publicly about his grief. When he did, it was measured, reserved. The man who once controlled every outcome now lived with the consequences that he could not rewrite. As Fritz's health declined, brain cancer began to take its toll. In one of their final and most painful moments together, Fritz confronted Kevin, not as a promoter, but as a broken father. Fritz pointed a gun at his son and said, "You'd kill yourself too if you had the guts." Kevin did not respond with anger. He did not respond with fear. Instead, he answered quietly, "Dad, it takes guts to live, not guts to die." Fritz looked at him and said, "You're afraid, don't you?" Kevin responded, "No, sir." He asked his father to lower the gun, then gently took it from his hands. Kevin would later say that he did not blame his father. He understood it was the illness, not the man. And when Fritz finally passed, Kevin did not feel anger. He felt relief. Relief that his father's suffering had finally ended. Relief that the man who built the empire could finally rest. On September 10, 1997, Fritz passed away at the age of 68. He passed away having achieved everything he set out to build in wrestling, except peace. His empire was gone, his family was fractured, his sons had passed away, and only one part of the Von Erich legacy remained. Not a championship, not a promotion, not a name carved into history. A life. Kevin Von Erich. The story of the Von Erich family is often told as a tragedy, and in many ways it is. A family bound by love and broken by loss. Brothers who stood side by side in the ring, only to be taken one by one far too soon. For years, it seemed like there was no escape from the pattern. Pain followed success, silence followed grief, and grief followed grief. Not every story ends the way it begins. When the noise faded, when the crowds were gone, when the dynasty finally collapsed under its own weight, one brother remained. Kevin didn't win by becoming immortal in the ring. He didn't win by chasing ghosts. He won by staying. He carried the same losses. He felt the same pain. But instead of letting tragedy define the next generation, he made a different choice. He stepped away from the expectations, away from the pressure, away from the idea that love had to be earned through suffering. And in doing so, he broke the cycle. Kevin didn't erase the past. He honored it. by refusing to repeat it. In time, the wrestling world found ways to honor the Von Erich name. In 2009, the family was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, their legacy formally etched into history. Years later, their story would reach an even wider audience through The Iron Claw, a film that introduced a new generation to both their greatness and their pain. But immortality was never truly found in ceremonies or cinema. Where his father raised warriors, Kevin raised children. Where silence once lived, he chose presence. Where legacy once meant sacrifice, he chose safety. This wasn't weakness, this was strength redefined. The Von Erich story isn't just about what was lost, it's about what was saved. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't a championship, it's choosing life, it's choosing family, it's choosing to end the pain so it doesn't get passed on. And that is how the cycle ends. Not with tragedy, but with continuation.